given that planning and land use and development does operate under a current structure, what can planners do to start moving towards what you're envisioning in terms of policies, in terms of getting to know, you talk about this one area as a laboratory for ideas, but as a very specific place. What can planners do to maybe start understanding those specific places better?
Yeah, of course, I mean, maybe in my discourse at times I might sound like I'm condemning, the institution of planning or the point is that we lack a visionary governmental leadership. Mm-hmm. Right? We live in a kind of no tax territory, right? Mm-hmm. No to taxes. We live in a current political climate where our current administration is incredibly indifferent to the social and public institutions and programs to the city. So this sort of, we live in a context where the public debate about densities is still tarnished by very backward and very conservative and agendas, full of fear of the other. So it's very difficult. It's part of the agenda here is how do we construct new kind of processes in terms of leadership, in terms of visionary leadership. Again, this sort of tension between the top down and the bottom up. I feel that every development in the United States is still, or our idea of development is controlled by the power of economic capital. Economic value is always what is seen as the seed of development. Never the consideration that social and cultural value would be also an engine for economic development, or ultimately social capital, right? People constructing their own conditions of sustainability in many of these neighborhoods. So, in essence, is that there is an absence of leadership, okay? And of course, beneath that, in all the kind of substrata of the kind of other layers, is an entrenched bureaucratic process that is incredibly rigid and backward, where planners, architects, everybody subordinated to the logics of this top-down development, right? Lending structures, again, political structures that benefit only one category of production, of building, of pro forma, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that there is a way, the need to inject in our institutions a very different way of thinking. It's completely, I mean, I know that sounds very reductive and naive and maybe ultimately, too general, but part of what I at times think of in terms of my own practice is that I speak of my practice as the tactics of encroachment that I was mentioning. Not only into spatial, into boundaries, into redefining public and private limits, but primarily tactics of encroachment into the stupidity of institutional thinking, into the kind of rigidity of the way that things are being done, the kind of mortgages or systems that are really not understanding that in the informal economies in many neighborhoods, of small businesses, in the entrepreneurial energies, there could be other logics of economy that would also be part of the system, right, in the same spot. So again, I think that to be more specific about your question, planners and the institutions of planning, I think, could advance their thinking by creating partnerships with these social service agencies. Not everyone, but maybe identify specific territories where incredible work has been developed on the ground by these agencies. And by creating these partnerships, I think, they could maybe produce other processes. That's the reason Casa Familiar for me is important, because I see it that in the future, as immigrants continue to come here, no matter how high the border wall is built, or how much Homeland Security installs this project of surveillance everywhere, I think that these governments would have to decentralize themselves and create partnerships with neighborhoods. So that these entities could become informal city halls, disseminating information, thinking of themselves as think tanks that monitor and that measure much of this dynamics. Let's say. So to invent new categories of zoning, right, that benefit the provisional and the ephemeral and the informal at the scale of the neighborhood. To stop thinking of this totalizing zoning idea of a kind of homogenizing, where the city is divided in bubbles, but instead just maybe thinking that certain neighborhoods might allow themselves to produce a very different, again, ideal land use and so on. So I think primarily that the planning institutions could maybe partner with these agencies in the future.
And I think that may be happening on small scales in certain areas. Don't you think, with community development corporations working to do small affordable housing projects? I mean, do you see it happening?
Yes, but they're still dominated by depending on the developers. Yeah. How do we empower a neighborhood to be a developer? The whole neighborhood to be a developer of its own housing stock. How do these non-profits maybe purchase land so that they can then distribute micro loans and allow the owners of these poor owners of the land anyway, to become micro developers? Yes, these development corporations in neighborhoods, they are just perpetuating the kind of engine that has, installed this very top-down still idea, and backed up and framed by the kind of rhetoric of new urbanism, right? That allows developers to somehow install the project of still top-down privatization, but not now dressed in a nicer way, in terms of better proportions, color palette and beautification. It's the same, the same kind of process. I'm talking about a more radical sort of transformation of a certain, and I'm not talking about at the scale of the city. I mean, it's not that this is something that would apply everywhere, but I think that even in these efforts in certain communities, redeveloping themselves from within, still they are causing a lot of gentrification. This is a very homogenizing project. Condos everywhere, even if they are better designed by new urbanists, and so on. So I think that it's perpetuating the recipes. Maybe it's shifting, and we would agree, 1 degree, okay, because at least the fabric has a better texture, okay? But nevertheless it's very homogenizing, and not understanding, again, the logics of other socioeconomic processes or inequality. I think that's what new urbanism has ignored is the socioeconomic inequalities that continue to really be the most essential sort of problem in our contemporary city. And so, again, what you're saying, well, some change, so something is happening in some of these CDCs, or how do you call them,
the
community development corporations,
the nonprofit groups that come together as builders.
Right. Yes.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing what happens with Casa Familiar and some of the other projects that you're working on. So I hope you'll keep us up to date.
Yes.
On how
Yes.
things
No,
are
I
going.
think that finally, after 5-6 years, we're at a moment where the project will finally be built with, with our collaboration with this foundation that was mentioned, the Park Foundation from New York. The politics of San Diego, even if tenuous, and even if there's a lack of leadership, are kind of in alignment at this moment to finally allow us to expedite the process in terms of the variances. So it looks pretty promising that in the next 2 years we might build these 2 pilot projects. So that would be great.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks very much for speaking with us, Teddy, and for being our featured speaker for the 2007 L'Enfant Lecture Series. If you'd like to learn more about Estudio Teddy Cruz's current work, you can find out more on the APA's website, which is planning.org. And is there anywhere else that people can find out more about your work? You should mention?
We are developing a website at this moment.
Okay.
Yes, other than that, probably the architects, California Architects website.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you.